everybody. How you doing? Well, that's good. Welcome to the PHLY Flyers Pregame Show presented by Coors Light. Visit CoorsLight.com/PHLY Hockey to get Coors Light delivered or to find a store near you. My name is Bill Matz. I'm your director of fun and games for the evening. Joining me tonight, live and in studio in our old home, right here in Studio A, it is Philadelphia's #1 hockey beat writer, Charlie O'Connor. What's going on tonight, Chuck?
It's good to be in studio, William. I'm going to enjoy this.
It is.
Not a watch-along, but we got pre- and post-game.
No watch-along. The Sixers have a watch-along tonight. We do not. When I saw, I was like, wait, does that mean we? No, they wouldn't do that to us twice.
No.
Putting us up against the Sixers would not be like putting us up against the Eagles.
That is true.
Thursday night prime time.
Yeah. Especially given the way the Sixers season is going.
Yeah, not quite the same there. But yeah, Sixers. But we will be here for pre- and post-game tonight, as we always are. And yes, we have heard the news about the David Jiricek trade. We're going to get into that in a little bit, and we'll definitely discuss it in post-game. But yeah, we only have a half hour. We have stuff to get to today. And it starts, Charlie, with the lineup. A couple of changes here, most notably Zamula in, Grans out, and Kolosov in the back-to-back gets the start. It was Fedotov yesterday, so we knew how that was going to go.
We knew there was no chance they were going to go Fedotov 2 games in a row. 2 days in a row.
That would have been very funny. But that's really the only lineup changes tonight. I assume the lines and pairs will remain the same.
Given that they probably played the best all-around game of their season yesterday, I would think they're probably going to keep everything together.
Is that a little surprising to you that they took Grans out, or it's just like, listen, we got to get Zamula in. It's a back-to-back. You were in the AHL 2 weeks ago. Even though we won, you're out.
Yeah, I think that's ultimately the reason. Look, I talked about this on the show, I believe, either earlier this week or late last week, about the fact that they've been open that they're not going to just toss Yegor Zamula into the dustbin, that they still think it's valuable to develop him. They still want to play him. And yes, Helge Grans has been playing well. And obviously Emil Andre has been playing well. We'll talk about him a little bit later in the show. But they still think Zamula has more to give, and they are not just going to let him get lost in the shuffle. So they were going to get him back in at some point. To me, while it's a little weird that you don't roll the exact same lineup given how well you played on Friday, the back-to-back part of it I think is big because of just the element of he's a young guy, not a lot of NHL experience, and they can talk themselves into the idea of, well, maybe he doesn't have to do a back-to-back. This can be a game that he can watch and see from above what maybe he can do a little bit better, and he doesn't have to get the pounding of a back-to-back at this point of the year, and it's a good time to get Zamula back in. So my guess is that's all it is. Just the fact that they, as I've said before, they like Zamula a lot more than, especially Kelly, but also you, I think, do. And they don't see value in just letting him wither on the vine as a healthy scratch for 4 weeks.
I see value in Yegor Zamula as a bottom of the roster defenseman, and that's fine. And if they want to make this some sort of rotation with those guys, now that, Emil Andre is immune to that unless he falls off a cliff anytime soon. He is in your top 4 for the foreseeable future. But if they want to turn the bottom, 3-4 spots into some sort of rotation, that's fine with me. I just think there's more information to be gained about what Grans can be. But Zamula is still a part of this thing, and if he's your 5th, 6th, 7th defenseman going forward, it's completely fine with me. I always want the shiny new thing, Charlie.
And Grans has been fine.
Yeah.
I don't think
I've seen some charts. I don't know what they mean, but they look good sometimes.
Yeah, he's been okay. And Zamula, a lot of the season hasn't been okay. So I get the concern, but I do think a lot of this is just them wanting to get Zamula back in. And a back-to-back is a time where you can sell it to Grans as not being we're sitting you because you did something wrong. It's just we're sitting you because you've only been in the NHL for a few weeks and it's a back-to-back and we don't need to have you play in both games of the back-to-back.
No, it makes total sense. This is not something I'm going to complain about too much. It's you got to get him in. A back-to-back is a perfect opportunity to do it. And you see the way the Flyers have performed in back-to-backs, Chuck. Now, it's funny. They had 3 back-to-backs in their first 9 games. 6 of their first 9 games were the front or back end of a back-to-back.
Yeah, there's a reason why by the end of October,
they were all dead.
I like looked like I was going to die. It was exhausting for the writers. Can't imagine how exhausting it was for the players. It's crazy.
But the Flyers in those games were 0-3. They did not fare especially well in the back end of back-to-backs. But they haven't had one in a month.
Yeah, it's been
the last one, I think, was like the 28th and 29th, and now we're 29th and 30th of November. So it's been about a month since their last one.
That said, it's also a 3 games in 4 nights. This is a tough one. And like this should be a game on paper. I think the Flyers should win because I think they are a better team than the Blues. But it is a tough ask for back-to-back with travel, 3rd game in 4 nights. Like there might be some tired legs on the ice. Let me put it that way.
There definitely will be, but like coming into the year, it's the Flyers and Blues. I don't know if the Flyers are better. It's maybe comparable. The Blues have some question marks, like with their offer sheet guys and how exactly good some of their players, because they've like a couple of their guys have had up and down years. You're not quite sure at this point. After what we've seen, I think the Flyers are better, but Jim Montgomery factor, he's 2-0. We'll talk about the Blues in a little. I want to talk about what's changed, Chuck, because when the Flyers were 0-3 in those 3 back-to-backs a month ago, it's like, this team just might not be as good as the one last year. The goalies are bad. They're getting even less out of the center position. All these things are just going poorly. They don't have that same jump. It's just a little different. Just didn't feel the same. But here we are, and at least like by total points, right on the outside or in a playoff spot based on how you want to do it. But like points percentage, no. But NHL.com for some reason doesn't sort that way. But they're like on the edge of the playoffs one way or another.
Yeah, they are.
How the hell did they get here from like a couple of weeks ago? I'm giving Brenna, tankathon, and we're just going to run the simulator a couple times a week because that's like where it looked like the season was going. Suddenly, not so fast.
Yeah, I think one thing that's very funny, if you look at where the Flyers were this time last season, 24 games in the year, they had a 12-10-2 record. This year, they have an 11-10-3 record. So if they just get one of those overtime losses into a win, one post that they hit in those games that goes in, they have the exact
shootout that hits the post.
Yeah, they have the exact same record as they did last year, which is wild given how bad it seemed in October.
I also think we've, like, what's the phrase you always use? We've retconned the beginning of last season. It wasn't until Ersson got going and they had a good goalie going every night that they actually started winning. Yeah. Like, there was a couple of, like, that San Jose game was also like kind of a turning point.
Yeah,
they got season's over.
They won a bunch of games right after that. Right after you had your meltdown.
Right after. Listen, because I bet you John Tortorella had a similar meltdown.
Yeah, probably.
But like, I do think like we have in our, they were good from the start last year. Not really. And they took a little longer to get going this year, but now they're exactly where they were basically.
I think that the difference between the 2 years is that while they weren't winning a ton at the start of the year, they weren't getting blown out. Like they were about, a little under 500, I feel like, at that point. But the underlying quality of their play was much better in October of last season versus October of this season, which is why I think a lot of us were very concerned, about just how good this team was going to be. I guess if you're a person who wants them to tank, then you were excited because you're like, man, this team might be really bad. But over the last, I believe, 11 games. So this is since November 6th. This was the game against Tampa Bay, the Fedotov game where he plays real well against Vasilevsky on the road trip. They win in a shootout. Then they go into Florida. They lose a tight game against a really, really good team in the Panthers, obviously the defending champions. Since that Tampa Bay game, they are 7-2-2. That is a point pace of 119 standings points.
Seems good.
That's like good.
President's Trophy-ish.
Pretty solid. Before that Tampa game, they were tied for the worst points percentage in hockey. So there's a very clear
4-8-1 going into that Tampa game, and now they're 11-10-3.
Yeah, there's a very clear delineation point between when they were playing poorly and when they started playing well. And I talked about this on Twitter and on Blue Sky today, but I want to go into a little bit more depth about it on this show because I mentioned in postgame yesterday that the 3 things, when I did my breakdown, I think it was like 2.5 weeks into the year, and I said, the Flyers might just not be very good because if you look at it, there are 3 things they had in the first 2/3 of last season that they just don't have anymore. They are not the same team for these reasons. The first reason was Sean Couturier wasn't playing like a top 6 NHL center. Second reason was they lost Sean Walker, and by losing Sean Walker, they lost their quality second pair. They became a 1-pair team. And the third thing was they first they lost Carter Hart. Then, because they lost Carter Hart, they ran Sam Ersson to the ground
Ersson went into
because
the
they didn't have a backup goalie. They didn't have a number 2 or a 1B, whatever you want to call it. Those are the 3 things. And through 3 weeks of the season, it looked like, again, they didn't have any of those things. Sean Couturier wasn't scoring, wasn't doing a lot. Their second pair was, to be blunt, a mess. And their backup goalies, Fedotov primarily at that point, it was a disaster. He couldn't stop a puck. It was awful. Couturier started to turn it around. Obviously, he had that big Minnesota game. So he started to turn it around in October. We were starting to get the, not point per game Selke Couturier, but we were getting good Sean Couturier. Sean Couturier that was reasonably close to the guy they got in the first 2/3 of last season. But they still weren't getting a second pair or any goaltending really beyond Sam Ersson. They did not have a quality backup goalie. November 6th is the turning point for a couple of reasons. Number one, it was the Fedotov game. Fedotov turns it around. It's his first good game. Ever since then, he's been pretty good. The other reason, though, is because if you remember, 2 days before that Tampa game, Emil Andre was dreadful against Carolina. Really bad game. You're like, we were kind of impressed by him his first few games, but that Carolina game, you're thinking, ooh, they might have to send this guy down. He just might not be ready. Tampa, he plays well. Florida, he plays amazing, and then he's off to the races. Those 2 things, because you'd already gotten Couturier back to reasonably effective. Emil Andre and the goaltending, the 2 biggest reasons why they are on this 11-game surge. And I want to kick this off by talking about Emil Andre. We have a great graphic from our amazing producer, Brenna. So before November 6th, Andre had played 5 games in the NHL. Obviously, he didn't make the team out of camp. He got called up on that road trip, but didn't play, then got sent back down, then got called back up. He'd only played 5 games in the NHL before November 6th. He was getting about 16.5 minutes a game. His 5-on-5 expected goals for percentage, about 45%. Not that great, whatever. He's showing flashes. He's doing some good things, but certainly not a game changer. Since 11-6, 9 games, nearly 21 minutes per night. He's easily been moved up into the top 4. 65.28% expected goals for percentage. Like, that isn't just good, that's incredible. And I certainly wouldn't expect him to continue to do that. But
55 is great.
55 is great. Anything above 55, you're like,
and they're 10% over that.
He's 10. When he is on the ice, the Flyers have controlled 65% of the expected goals. That is incredible. That is big difference number 1, because suddenly the Flyers aren't just, we have 1 pair with Travis Sanheim, because obviously Cam York was injured, and that pair's fine because Sanheim's good. And then we have a bunch of nothing. Now they have the pair with Travis Sanheim, which now has been supercharged because it's got Cam York back on it, who is a good defenseman. And then you've got the second pair that Emil Andre has been anchoring. Recently, he's set up a solid duo with Rasmus Ristolainen. Ristolainen's playing better as well. But suddenly, now you're a 2-pair team. Your third pair, haven't quite figured that out yet. Drysdale's been out. Drysdale and Sealer really didn't show a ton together in the early stages. You're hoping that comes together. But you can get by as a playoff contender, not a cup contender, but as a playoff contender if you have 2 good pairings. And with Andre taking the step forward that he took, really starting on November 6th, statistically and by the eye test, into that role, the Flyers now have 2 good pairs. Now, if Andre falls off a cliff, they're right back to where they started. But for now, Andre has solidified that second pair and turned them into a team with 2 above average pairs. That is a big reason why they are playing so much better.
Yeah, we've all been really impressed with Emil Andre. And like I said so much leading up to Cam York coming back and right around the time he came back, like, can we afford to have those 2, Sanheim and York, paired together still when you look at this defense? And it's like, well, who the hell else? Like, you have to split them up just so you have 2 pairs.
Exactly.
And Andre creates that situation where, we can have an actual, like, kind of quality top pair here with our 2 best defensemen and then still have a decent one. And Rasmus Ristolainen deserves credit as well.
He's playing well
with the way he has played.
Absolutely.
Trade him right now, Danny. Do it right before he gets hurt. Let's go. But Emil Andre, like, I really like the synergy of how the pair compared to the second pair last year, like Sealer and Walker. You have the one dude, like Walker, outlet passes, orchestrating the breakout. He's pretty good defensively, but that was his thing. Like, he was the puck mover, and Nick Sealer, the thing they always say about Nick Sealer, you know where he's going to be. He's going to be defending. He's the gritty guy. He's the tough guy. And you compare that to what they have, like, Emil Andre, obviously, puck mover. And he's been pretty good defensively. And then Rasmus Ristolainen, just a big bastard who's going to hit everyone. Yeah. Awesome. Perfect. Yeah. Perfect combination, and it has worked really well. And
it is one of those pairs that, like, it fits the traditional view of what a balanced pairing should look like when you have a small puck mover and a big physical defenseman. It's been good, and it does, in a way, replicate the Sean Walker, Nick Sealer pairing from last year, which was so integral to them being as good as they were over the first 2/3 of the year. The hope going into the season, at least my realistic hope, was Jamie Drysdale maybe could be the close to Sean Walker. He's not there. Now, obviously, now he's not even playing, but even when he was playing, he showed he was not even close to that point. They kind of fell ass backwards a little bit into Emil Andre because he wasn't even on the team to start the year. Now he is their Sean Walker. And the question is, can he keep it up? But right now, he is their Sean Walker.
They did recognize that he won the 8th spot.
True.
And he did start the year with he was on the
game
trip.
One.
Not game one.
He showed up midway through the trip.
I was going to say, no, wait. That was a whole thing we talked about. That didn't happen. He did eventually get there.
Yeah. He got there eventually.
It is kind of funny. Like, they did recognize it. Like, he was the best defenseman of the guys trying to make the team, but just none of them made it.
Yeah.
And then by day 2, it was like, well, we need someone.
We need somebody.
And finally, he gets on the ice.
Sealer also couldn't feel his foot.
Yeah,
that was the big thing.
Sealer just... it wasn't even a shot. It just hit me in the leg, and now suddenly can't feel my foot.
I can't feel my foot.
Odd.
So that's number one. The Emil Andre emergence, huge part, because he has now solved the how do they replace Sean Walker question. The other resolution here is the backup goaltending, which has been so much better. So pull up this stat. So before November 6th, the backup goalies, so the combination of Ivan Fedotov and Alexei Kolosov, were averaging an 8.43 save percentage. Now, in layman's terms, that's an 84% save percentage. That is horrific. It is ghastly.
Even
you can come up with, like, just get a thesaurus and find all of the words that can describe awful. And that's what it was. And then the advanced metrics back it up too. If you're looking at, like, well, maybe they were facing a ton of high quality shots. No, they basically had given up an extra 5.5 goals based on the quality of shots they faced. The backup goalies, whenever they played, were losing. Those were almost guaranteed losses. If Sam Ersson wasn't in, they weren't going to win. And Sam Ersson isn't going to go, 50-0. He's going to lose some games too. It's not like he's an incredible goalie.
He had a rough patch. He figured it out and was starting to look good before the injury. But he wasn't exactly setting the world on fire at one point, and it was, that's rough. Like, even with this year, save percentage average being at around 900.
It's around 900,
It's down this year. Yeah. We've talked about it. Like, 843 is... it's all those horrible words.
No, it's literally it's 1980s Gretzky.
I honestly can't believe, like, minus negative 5.5 goals is real bad. I can't believe it's not double digits.
Yeah,
the way they were giving up goals was just freaking insane.
But then since you have that big game, Fedotov, has his, I don't even know what you want to call it, his breakthrough, his road to Damascus moment. I don't know, God calls down and the light goes on him and he figures it out. But since then, Fedotov's been a lot better and Kolosov's been fine. And suddenly, since then, 909 save percentage, 91% of the shots are being stopped by the combination of the two backup goalies who have now had to become the starting goalies since Ersson hasn't been playing, and by the advanced metrics as well, plus 1.62. They've saved about an extra goal versus what you would expect them to based on the quality of the shots they face. Andre and the goaltending, the two biggest reasons why, since November 6th, the Flyers have been a legitimately good team by their win-loss record.
And that's kind of what's changed for them. So we'll see if they can keep it going tonight against the St. Louis Blues. This is the PHLY Flyers pregame show brought to you by Coors Light. Choose chill. And now it's time for our pregame bets. This pregame pick segment is brought to you by Bet365. Use code PHLY365 when you sign up. Whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Must be 21 and physically located in Pennsylvania. If you or someone you know has a gambling problem and wants help, call or text 1-800-GAMBLER. Just one tonight, and we are going with...
He's got to score at some point, right?
It has to happen. I mean, Charlie, not only does he have 16 shots on goal in his last 4 games, 23 in his last 7, he hasn't scored in his last 13 games. His last goal...
We're talking about Joel Farabee.
Joel Farabee.
Indeed.
His last goal came against Florida. He has 1 goal in his last 13. It came against Florida. That was so long ago. He has to score. Just eventually, everyone scores like once every 15 games. It's like Nick Delorier scores at that rate sometimes. Yeah. But Rasmus Ristolainen is on a 4-game point streak. You have to eventually get something, and it just has not been the case for Joel Farabee.
Look, if you're playing real bad, you can go 20 games without scoring. Yeah. The thing about Farabee is that he's creating chances. He's creating shots. He's involved. It's just nothing's going in for him. So I like this pick because at some point, maybe it has to be like a puck goes off his butt or something.
Whatever. I don't care how it goes in. We need this goal. Joel Farabee needs this goal. Maybe I just jinxed it, but honestly, he can't get any more jinxed than he's been. He's playing almost 17 minutes a night recently, and has nothing to show for it, despite creating a ton of chances. Maybe tonight is the night. Plus 350.
There we go.
We will take it. All right.
Should we talk a little bit about Jiricek now?
Yeah, let's do some Jiricek. Who cares about the Blues? Jim Montgomery's there. He's 2-0. Yeah,
they hired Jim Montgomery a few games ago, so he's now the coach. Maybe they're getting the new coach bounce. We shall see.
Yeah.
But they're not very good.
And Phil Broberg comes back tonight. He's been out since 11-2. Let's see. David Jiricek.
So the big news
We've been talking about him, and he was on the trade block. He hasn't quite really had any substantial time in Columbus. They've had him in the AHL. They've scratched him. It's been weird.
It has been weird.
For a couple of regimes now in Columbus. And now he has officially been traded. Minnesota Wild.
He is a Wild.
He is a Wild. Minnesota picks him up. They also get a 5th-round pick. Columbus receives Damon Hunt. He's a
22-year-old defenseman.
Yeah, he's a little smaller than Helge Grans. They're kind of comparable. He's been more productive in the AHL, but I think they're similar players just based on an elite prospects comparison. They give up a 2025 first, a 2027 second, and a 4th-rounder at some point. It really feels like if this was the asking price across the board, Danny Briere easily matches this.
So here's my understanding of where the Flyers were in this. My understanding is, to be clear, the Flyers did check in. I wouldn't say that they were leading the charge, but they checked in. They had interest in Jiricek. Jiricek obviously was a 6th overall pick in 2022, the year they took Cutter Gauthier. I think they like David Jiricek. I think they see a guy who has some upside, whether it's number 1 defenseman upside, I don't know. But he's certainly a guy worth checking in on because he has upside. My understanding is that, and there may be a lot of reasons for this, but my understanding is that the guys that Columbus wasn't even necessarily the guys that Columbus would have accepted a deal for, but it was the guys that Columbus wanted Briere to offer up just to be in the race are guys that I don't think the Flyers want to trade. And I think that at its core is what happened here. Now, is it possible that those guys, maybe the Flyers are overrating? Maybe. I truly do not know the specific players. But I do believe that when the Flyers checked in, they found out pretty quickly that the guys that Columbus was interested in are guys that they consider to be functionally untouchable, at least for a guy like Jiricek, who maybe they don't think is going to be this slam dunk superstar. Obviously, if you're trading for Connor McDavid, you're willing to give up anybody.
Yeah.
Jiricek is not a guy that maybe they view high enough to give up the types of players that Columbus wanted. Now, could part of that be that it was an in-division trade? Maybe. You theorized that off air, that possibly Damon Hunt isn't an A prospect.
He's not a premier prospect.
He's not a premier prospect by any means. Maybe if the Flyers were in the Western Conference in Vegas's division, maybe the asking price would have been less because maybe they didn't want to trade Jiricek to a division rival unless a division rival was willing to pay through the nose essentially for him, and the Flyers, I guess, were not. That's possible. Maybe also it's possible that Columbus just doesn't like the guys who the Flyers are willing to move, and the only guys they really like are the guys who the Flyers consider to be integral parts that they are not willing to give up. But I do believe the Flyers were involved. I just believe that the Flyers found out pretty quickly that Columbus's view of the guys they were willing to move was not particularly high.
I can see there being maybe an extra in-division tax. Like Don Waddell's there, not not the youngest dude. I always think it's absolutely asinine. Mm-hmm. Like if you, we can't get killed by this, then don't trade him. Keep him if you think he's good. Yeah. But that is very old school thinking. Like you don't make in-division. Like the Flyers and Devils have made like 2 trades ever. Like it's very much a thing, especially in hockey. But I wonder if that's the case.
Could be.
Also, there's this. I wanted to make the trade. I don't know if David Jiricek's good or not. He went 6th overall. You really liked him in that draft.
I did. Yeah. I wouldn't say I loved him, but I liked him. I liked him more than Gauthier.
My issue has been, and I would have been elated if they made this trade because trades are great for everyone.
Great for our views.
Columbus has been trying to replicate what Tortorella did for them since they got rid of John Tortorella. They have been doing this weird thing with Jiricek where you haven't really earned the ice time. You got to play in the AHL. You got to be scratched. You're not really our guy. He didn't like that. That's why he's leaving. They're trying to replicate what our coach does. Now, we have John Tortorella, the actual guy who has had success doing this, and Brad Shaw, the defensive wizard, who can take bad players and make them good, and good players and make them great. So maybe that would have been the X factor that makes it all work out. Maybe. But I wonder if there's, I don't want to say character issues, because I think of like character issues as like off-ice stuff. Yeah. But just like...
Or that he just doesn't listen to coaching.
Attitude issues.
Thinks he's so great and won't listen to anyone.
Like he's LaFlemme from Goon.
From Goon.
Like he just thinks he's the man. Like, I don't know. I wonder if that's part of it. And it's like, well, if it didn't work and you're trying to replicate what Tortorella does, we have that guy. If this is just another Morgan Frost situation, then I don't see what the point is.
I mean, it's possible.
That's just
here's my thing.
I wanted him.
If they had concerns about his character, I don't think they would have checked in the first place. So I do think there was interest. I don't think there was anything that they saw as a dramatic red flag. Now, is it a little bit of a red flag that the team that drafted him is willing to trade him 2 years later? Sure. That's a little bit of a red flag. And maybe that prevented the Flyers from offering up the type of guys that Columbus would have required for them to get into the realistic bidding. Where I'm at with this is it's a bummer because I like Jiricek, and I do think that from a fit standpoint, he made sense for the Flyers. This is something where we're just going to have to see how it plays out, because if the Flyers prove right and Jiricek is just, a guy that maybe was worth a package of, worthy of a guy who's going to be a solid second pair defenseman, then it's not the end of the world, especially if guys like Andre and Drysdale become quality second pair defenseman. With Andre, it's like if he just stays a quality second pair defenseman, because that's what he's been. The disappointment on my part, it's less about Jiricek specifically, and it's more about this was an opportunity. This was an opportunity to get a guy with potential high-end upside, and when it came down to it, the Flyers decided they weren't willing to pay up. Now, maybe they're right. Maybe the guys that Columbus would have required for them to get involved are guys that will ultimately be better than David Jiricek in terms of overall value, or maybe they're not going to be better than Jiricek, but if you say Jiricek, that guy plus the first, plus the second, then suddenly it's way too much. Maybe. But it was an opportunity. It was an opportunity, and now it's an opportunity missed. And at some point in this,
they're going to have to pull a trigger
in the next
eventually.
year, in the next 2 years, they're going to have to pull the trigger on a couple of these kinds of trades. And this is one that they didn't. And maybe they couldn't. Maybe it would have been foolish for them to do it. But at some point, they're going to have to, and they didn't this time. And I think it's fair to be bummed that they didn't this time.
Absolutely. if they're not going to draft high, at least purposefully and consistently for several years, we keep asking the question, how do they get those guys then? Because that's typically where the star players are. And what are the Flyers missing? Star players.
Indeed.
Here was your opportunity to go get one of them. You did.
Yeah, to get a guy who maybe could be.
Yeah.
Again,
Now,
maybe he's not, but you're going to have to take a swing on one or two of these types of guys, and now one of these types of guys is no longer available. That's a bummer.
Now maybe Minnesota wants to turn around and go, you know what? Rossi's ELC expires after this year. Jiricek has another year left. We want to make way for a Kaprizov extension that helps us. Maybe they trade for Rossi tonight. Who the hell knows?
That'd be cool.
We will see. All right, let's hit this super chat before we get out of here. Just
super
one.
Chat.
Yeah, pregame super chat from Adrian Franklin. Does Bobby Brink have prime Cam Atkinson potential?
I mean, that would be the best case scenario. Cam Atkinson scored 40 goals.
Cam Atkinson had a 35-goal, 62-point season. He had a 41-goal, 69-point season. I think Bobby Brink has best year in Philly Cam Atkinson potential, 23 goals, 50 points. I think that's doable.
I think it's doable.
I just I see where you're going. Like, okay, maybe he's not a top line player, but you have him in the middle six and situationally he can help you.
I think Cam Atkinson in his prime was a really, really good second line winger.
Cam Atkinson had 19 shorthanded goals in his career. Bobby Brink probably will never have any.
Yeah, I don't think he's going to be. Don't see that.
Just the speed alone, they're a little different. But I see where you're getting at. Can he be that middle six forward with that? So I see more 50-point than 65 plus point.
I don't think I see that kind of upside in Brink. But hey,
hell, that would be dope.
You never know.
I would love it.
All right,
but
got
I
one
think
more
he's
super
just,
chat under the
another
wire.
one more before we get out of here.
Oh, friend of the pod, Gritzy Ross.
Gritzy Ross. I pronounced it right this time.
Gritzy Ross.
Got in at the last minute. Love y'all. Thank you very much, Gritzy. Appreciate you coming by. And we thank all of you for listening. Thank you for hanging out. That is all the time we have on the PHLY Flyers pregame show presented by Coors Light. Visit CoorsLight.com/PHLY hockey to get Coors Light delivered or find a store near you. We will be back with post-game, so tune in for that as soon as this game goes final. My name is Bill Matz. That's Charlie O'Connor. Let's go Flyers.
We all silly like the mayor.